Why did Ulf turn against everyone at Tumbleton? House of the Dragon Season 3, Episode 8, explained. Warning. Spoiler warning. This video contains major spoilers for House of the Dragon, Season 3, Episode 8, and Fire and Blood, including Ulf the White's betrayal at Tumbleton. Ulf the White was supposed to be one of Rhaenyra Targaryen's greatest weapons. He claimed Silverwing, one of the most powerful dragons in Westeros, and suddenly a former commoner had the power to change the entire Dance of the Dragons. But in Season 3, Episode 8, everything falls apart. Ulf turns against the people who gave him his dragon. He turns against the Greens, and eventually he turns against almost everyone around him. So why did Ulf do it? Was he promised more power? Did he simply want to survive? Did his growing arrogance finally consume him? Or was his betrayal the result of everything that had happened to him since claiming Silverwing? Let's break down what really happened. 1. Ulf was never a traditional Targaryen loyalist. The first thing to understand about Ulf is that he isn't a traditional member of the Targaryen dynasty. He's a dragon seed. He has Valyrian blood, but he's not a noble prince who grew up believing that the Iron Throne belongs to his family. He's a common-born man who suddenly discovers that he can ride a dragon, and that changes everything. Before claiming Silverwing, Ulf had very little political power. After claiming her, he's suddenly one of the most dangerous people in Westeros. That enormous transformation is at the heart of his story. 2. Silverwing changes Ulf's position. Silverwing isn't just any dragon. She's an enormous adult dragon who was once ridden by Queen Alysanne Targaryen. So when Ulf successfully claims her, he immediately becomes incredibly valuable. Rhaenyra needs dragonriders, and Silverwing gives her a massive advantage. Ulf is therefore treated as an important asset of the Black faction. But there's a problem. Rhaenyra can give Ulf a dragon, she can't completely control what happens after he gets one. And Ulf quickly begins to realize just how much power he possesses. 3. Ulf starts believing he's more important than everyone else. This is where his personality becomes crucial. Ulf isn't portrayed as someone who is particularly disciplined. He enjoys drinking, he enjoys attention, and he enjoys the new status that comes with being a dragon rider. Suddenly, nobles who would never have cared about him before have to take him seriously. That's intoxicating. And the more powerful Ulf becomes, the less satisfied he is with simply being told what to do. This becomes especially important when the Greens begin offering rewards to dragon riders. Ulf starts seeing what his dragon can get him, and eventually he wants more. 4. The Greens offer something Ulf wants. The Green forces understand exactly how valuable Ulf and Silverwing are. A dragon can change the outcome of a battle. So when Ulf is given an opportunity to switch sides, the offer isn't simply about ideology. It's about power, status, and reward. This is one of the most important differences between Ulf and someone like Roderick Dustin. Roderick fights because of loyalty and duty. Ulf is much more interested in what he can gain. And once he realizes that both sides need him, he begins to understand something terrifying. He has leverage. He isn't just a soldier anymore. He's a dragon rider. 5. Why does Ulf turn on the Blacks? In Fire and Blood, the exact motivation behind Ulf and Hugh's betrayal isn't presented with complete certainty. The historical accounts are conflicting, which is typical of the book's unreliable history format. But ambition, resentment, and the promise of greater rewards all play a role in how their betrayal is remembered. The show gives Ulf an even more personal build-up. He's repeatedly frustrated by how he's treated. He's looked down upon by nobles. He's reprimanded. And even after becoming a dragon rider, he still doesn't feel fully accepted by the world he has suddenly entered. That resentment matters. Ulf doesn't simply wake up one morning and decide to betray everyone. His behavior throughout the season shows that he increasingly believes he deserves more. 6. Then Tumbleton explodes. At Tumbleton, Ulf's betrayal becomes catastrophic. He has Silverwing, and that means his decision isn't simply the betrayal of one soldier, it's the betrayal of an entire army. A dragon rider switching sides can completely change the balance of a battlefield. And once Ulf turns against the Blacks, the consequences are enormous. The very creature Rhaenyra trusted to help defend her cause is now being used against it. That's what makes the moment so shocking. Rhaenyra didn't just lose a soldier, she lost one of her dragons. 7. Why does Ulf attack everyone? This is where the show's version becomes particularly interesting. Ulf's actions aren't simply a clean switch from black to green. He becomes increasingly unpredictable, and the Season 3 finale emphasizes that Ulf isn't someone who has suddenly developed a strong ideological commitment to the green cause. He's acting according to his own interests. That makes him far more dangerous. Because if Ulf doesn't truly belong to either side, who can control him? That's the real problem. He has Silverwing, he has power, and he has very little reason to remain loyal to anyone who can't give him what he wants. 8. Ulf and Hugh are not exactly the same. It's also important not to treat Ulf and Hugh Hammer as identical. They're eventually remembered together as the two betrayers, but their motivations aren't necessarily the same. Hugh's storyline is increasingly connected to his own ambitions and the treatment of ordinary people. Ulf is much more openly driven by ego, status, and personal reward. That's why Ulf's betrayal feels particularly believable. He's been showing signs of this personality for a long time. The dragon simply gives those traits enormous power. 9. The tragedy of giving dragons to commoners. There's a much bigger idea behind Ulf's story. Rhaenyra desperately needed more dragon riders, so she opened the gates to people who might have Targaryen blood. It worked, but there was a massive problem. How do you control someone who suddenly has the power of a dragon? You can threaten a knight, you can imprison a soldier, you can take away a lord's lands. But a dragon rider is different. Ulf can simply climb onto Silverwing and fly away. And if he decides to attack, an entire army can be destroyed. Rhaenyra's desperate strategy therefore creates one of the greatest threats to her own cause. 10. Ulf's betrayal changes the dance. The betrayal at Tumbleton is enormously important because it destroys one of Rhaenyra's greatest advantages. The Blacks had more dragons, but dragons are only useful if their riders are loyal. Ulf proves that lesson in the most devastating way possible. His betrayal also creates paranoia. If Ulf can switch sides, who else can? That becomes especially dangerous for Adam of Hall. Rhaenyra begins suspecting the remaining dragon seeds, and this has enormous consequences for the story. One dragon seed's betrayal causes Rhaenyra to question another dragon seed who is actually loyal. That's one of the most tragic consequences of Ulf's decision. 11. Ulf's biggest mistake. Ulf thinks that becoming a dragon rider means he has finally escaped being powerless. But he doesn't understand something. Power attracts enemies. The moment Ulf becomes powerful enough to threaten the nobles around him, they begin thinking about how to eliminate him. The Greens may need him, but they don't necessarily trust him. And that's the irony of his entire story. Ulf betrays Rhaenyra because he wants more power. But once he becomes powerful enough, everyone starts becoming afraid of him. And frightened people eventually start looking for ways to remove the threat. Final thoughts. So why did Ulf turn against everyone at Tumbleton? The answer comes down to ambition, resentment, ego, and the enormous power that came with Silverwing. Ulf began the war as a commoner. Then he claimed one of the greatest dragons alive. Suddenly, people who had once ignored him had to respect him. And Ulf started believing that he deserved more. The problem was that neither the Blacks nor the Greens could completely satisfy his ambitions. That's why his betrayal becomes so dangerous. He isn't simply choosing one political side, he's choosing Ulf. And once he realizes that Silverwing gives him the power to make his own rules, his behavior becomes increasingly unpredictable. That's also why his betrayal is so important to the larger story. Rhaenyra's decision to recruit dragon seeds gives her more dragons, but it also gives enormous power to people she cannot completely control. Ulf becomes the ultimate example of that mistake. He proves that having more dragons doesn't necessarily mean having more security. Sometimes it simply means having more people capable of betraying you. And the most ironic part is that Ulf believes becoming a dragon rider has finally made him untouchable. In reality, it makes him a target. Because once you become powerful enough to frighten both sides, you may discover that nobody wants you to survive. And after everything Ulf does at Tumbleton, the question is no longer whether he deserves his reputation as one of the two betrayers. The real question is, how long can Ulf the White survive after turning everyone against him? And if House of the Dragon continues drawing from fire and blood, his betrayal may be only the beginning of his downfall.